Hey, what's up, everybody? Shane with Battlefield Decks and Patios, and today we're going to be talking about how long it takes to build a deck. Now, depending on the type of deck you're building, that could be a wide range of time. So I usually tell people, like, if you're thinking about having a deck built, it can take anywhere from a week all the way up to 2 to 3 months. Now, when we talk 2 to 3 months, that's a really enormous deck. So it's really kind of important to know what size deck you're talking about when you're questioning how much time it's going to take to build that. But there's also more than just how long does it take to build the deck, because you may be thinking about building a deck and you have a deadline in mind. Maybe you have a graduation party coming up or an anniversary or a big celebration or something, that you want to have a bunch of people over for. And so you're planning on having this project built. So just thinking that, hey, the deck's only going to take a week or two, like that wouldn't help you out actually get it done in time. So let's talk about how long it actually takes to build a deck. So there's 3 main things that I always tell people to consider when they're looking at building a deck for their house. The first phase of that is actually going through the sales buying process, right? You got to consider it's going to take time to go through that, to get bids, to get quotes, to kind of hear through the noise and actually know what it is you're buying. The second phase to that is the permitting process. That is the process from once you pay to have a deck built, now you've got to submit a bunch of paperwork to the county, right? The third step to that is going to be the actual build process. So let's kind of back up and talk about all 3 of these processes so you can kind of have an idea of how long this stuff is going to take you to do. So that way, when you're planning for a deadline, you can actually look ahead a lot further and hit that deadline on time every time. So first part of that process, again, the sales buying process, that can take, for some people, that can take months, right? And a lot of people don't realize, like, when they want to meet a deadline for building a project, that it's going to take a lot of time for them to get people to come over to take measurements and give them quotes. And depending on how good or how bad the contractors are in your area, it can be a really just kind of a painful process for people. So awesome thing here at Battlefield Decks and Patios, we've actually made that process super simple by putting a calculator on our website where you can get pricing as fast as 30 seconds. And we get somebody out there to verify pricing and get that going right away so that you can have good pricing and kind of sign off and get rolling on the permit process within a week. But for most companies, you're going to be spending a couple weeks going back and forth, getting quotes, tweaking those, and then also being able to kind of compare apples to apples on those quotes to know that the companies that you're having bid on those projects are all kind of singing from the same song sheet, so to speak. So really important to kind of, get all of your ducks in a row before you even get into that process. You're going to want to already kind of plan out, as we spoke in the last video, about what the size of the deck is, what the design is. The more planning you can do in advance before you even get into the buying process, the faster the buying process can be for you. Because if you call a sales guy up and you say, hey, look, I already know the size of deck I want, I already know the decking, I already know the railings, all the little details that are going into it, they're going to be able to price that up really fast. If you don't know, and then you're dealing with multiple salespeople, sometimes those details can evolve as you're having those conversations. And next thing you know, you're getting quotes back from everybody, and they're totally different because one guy's pricing out a certain brand of deck and railing, and another guy, you told him, hey, you know what, I'd like to add some lighting on the rails for that. And another guy, you're like, well, maybe I'm thinking about just getting a wood deck. Give me a price on that. And then when you get all these bids, they're completely different. So again, the more planning you can do on the front end, it's going to be super helpful for you to speed up that process, get detailed, accurate pricing where you know you're going to get exactly what you want for the price and budget that you've already planned out. Let's talk about the second part of that. Now, once you've bought and paid for the deck and you're going into the process of getting it built, the first process after that, and step 2, what I would call this, is the permit phase, right? You now have to have framing plans drawn up. In some situations, you may need engineering documents. You have to have all of your paperwork in order for the company that you've hired to be able to submit everything to the county and get that permit. So making sure that you have a plat, number 1, for your house before you even engage the process of buying a deck is super important, because that plat is required in most counties to be able to figure out if you can actually build the deck that you want. So before the buying process even starts, I always tell people, hey, make sure you have a plat for your house so that way when you engage somebody to purchase a deck, you're already one step ahead. If you get in a situation when you've paid for a deck and then the company that you're working with says, hey, we need your plat to be able to do the submittals to the county, and you're like, hey, I don't even have a plat. What's that? Well, now you could be in a situation where it's going to take you weeks to get that made from an engineer. and cost hundreds of dollars to get done. So the permit process starts with every county with the framing plans, the plat, and any other documents that they require being submitted. And in our area where we're at here in Northern Virginia, most of the counties around here usually process a basic deck in about a week, sometimes 2, sometimes 3, depending on the seasonality of where we're at, right? A lot of people are building decks and projects like that in spring and summer. And so during those time frames, the county can start to back up on their turnaround times on permits. So that can take, up to 3 weeks, and in some situations 4 weeks, depending on what time of season you're looking at doing this. So the earlier you can get ahead of this, the earlier you can plan, the earlier you can have all your documents in a row, the faster that process can be. Also in the fall, things start to slow down. So permits usually get turned around faster in the fall time. So I always tell people, if you're planning on hitting a deadline with your deck, know that the permit process is going to take anywhere from a week to possibly 4 weeks. And the best time to get started on building a deck would be late winter, right before spring hits. Kind of right around June, when there starts to be a drop off in the building industry, because most people's kids are getting out of school and people are going on vacation. So that's a really great time to do submittals for a permit as well. And then also in the fall, once everybody gets off vacation and people get back to school and things are back to normal, usually things start to drop off, in October as far as permit submittals. So there's 3 times a year that are really good for submitting for permits where you can get them relatively quick. And then that leads us to our third and last step, and that is the production time. And so this kind of goes back to what I was saying at the start of this video, that the building of the deck can sometimes only be 1 week. We have plenty of decks that we literally do in 1 week. The first day we're out there digging holes. The second day we're having a footer inspection. The third day we're framing the deck. And by day 4, we're putting decking and railing and so forth on. And by day 5, we're ready to call in the final inspection. That's kind of an average, I would say, townhouse deck or residential house deck. So you're talking about a deck that's usually anywhere from, 12 to 25 feet wide and maybe extends off of the house anywhere from 12 to 16 feet. It's a real simple rectangular deck. It's going to be really fast to produce and build. Once you start getting into adding landings and multiple staircases, and maybe you have a house that isn't straight across the back, you have a house that kind of has a lot of in and outs on the back of it, and it becomes a more complex deck with multiple beams. Those can take up to 2 weeks. And if you have a deck that wraps around the house, right? And so now you're talking about a deck that can get up to 40 feet wide with another 20 extending past the corner of the house. Those get even more complex with even more beams. And so those can take up to 3 weeks to build. If we start talking about getting into screen and porch where you're adding a roof on top of it and that sort of thing, now you're in the 4 week to 6 week range. So it really depends on how large the project is. Basic deck, 1 week. You get up to a complex deck, it can take up to 3 weeks. And if you go with a screen and porch or something much larger like that, I would plan at least a month and maybe even up to 6 weeks. You always got to consider with the larger projects, there's multiple inspections that happen during that time frame as well. And sometimes you get to a phase in a project and it can take a couple days to get the inspection that you need. So you have to wait for the inspector for a couple days, which means the job stands still. And that adds up more time to the job. So start to finish, from the sales process all the way to permitting process and building the deck, I would say bare minimum, start planning 3 months in advance. Most people think, oh, well, that's, 3 months should be plenty of time. Sometimes 3 months isn't even enough time to plan ahead and get a job built correctly. So the sooner that you can get ahead of it, the sooner that you know that you want something done and you can start that process, the more that's going to set you up for success every single time. So hopefully that's been helpful for you guys. If you liked this video, please subscribe and hit the like button there, and catch our next video where we're going to talk about deck renovation. A lot of times people have old decks and they think, hey, maybe I need to have this torn down and a new deck built. Well, it may be that you can actually renovate that old deck, keep a lot of the structure, and save yourself a truckload of money. So see you there.